Explore the minds and marketing strategies behind today's winning brands and businesses. Tap into the power of the creator economy with Earned by Creator IQ. Here's Connor Begley.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Earned. Thanks for joining today. Today I have Doug Jensen, the SVP of Go-to-Market Analytics and Activation within the Center of Excellence at Estée Lauder. Thanks for joining the show, Doug.
Thanks, Connor. It's been a long time. We've known each other for about 10 years. So it's an honor and privilege to join you today.
Yes, it all goes back to that infamous folder you had with the when I came to your office in New York. You said, "Let's talk about this data that you have here." Way back when.
Yes, you did make a splash, and you guys still do that with how you publish things in WWD and Beauty Inc. So yes, that was indeed. That was a long time ago, Connor. So you've grown as a company a long way.
Yeah, I mean, you personally were one of our earliest advocates and believers. So thank you for all of the things that you contributed to our success.
Of course. I'm happy to be here.
So let's kind of do a quick brag reel on Doug. So Doug has been at Estée for about 9 years, and we should talk about what your role is. So it's going to be the first question, just so that people know what you focus on. Prior to that, you held senior analytics roles, VP, SVP at IRI, Nielsen, Avon. You got some board advisor roles, et cetera. So you're somebody that spent a lot of time looking at analytics, marketing, how this affects, and particularly how this affects kind of this consumer products industries and beauty in particular over the last, close to decade. And so really excited to have you in. I think you're going to provide a very unique perspective. We've had a lot of operators, we've had founders, we've had entrepreneurs, we've had, Wall Street analysts. I think your role, you're the first person to come in with kind of pure analytics focus, which is really exciting.
Yeah, I do have a unique role at Estée Lauder companies, and I would say unique in the beauty industry and maybe in larger or more other industries. So I've been at Estée Lauder, as you said, for about 9 years, and I wear basically a variety of roles within the analytics space. So in my current role, I look after CRM engagement, CRM activation, general marketing analytics. I am in charge of our MarTech operations. I do competitive and marketing intelligence. I do earned media measurement and social listening analytics, marketing mix modeling, which is my expertise and what I'm really most passionate about. And we'll talk today about how we use that to measure earned media. And then I'm also in charge of enterprise-wide marketing training. So as it relates to this conversation, we'll talk about earned media for the most part. And so, sure. my journey has been really interesting from a marketing analytics perspective. I was in university studying journalism and statistics. And my very first job at AC Nielsen was to basically use statistical models to measure advertising, which is a form of journalism. So for the 30 years I've been in the business, I have really been focused on that core sweet spot of measurement. And I would say my journey has been, from being a statistical analyst to going into all companies within the CPG space on the vendor side. And then about 15 years ago, I made the choice to go to the client side, so Avon and now Estée Lauder. So my career journey has been from statistical analyst to business consultant to beauty analytics expert, meaning expertise within the beauty industry.
Well, I think what's fascinating about kind of analytics, and I remember having this conversation with Steve, who was our only board. So the board members were John, me, and then Steve, who's been a CFO for maybe, 25, 30 years, very successfully in the software space. And he said the reason he loved being CFO is like when you have all the numbers, he's like, all the levers of the business, right? What drives what works well, why this works within this. He's like, it ends up being really critical to decision making, which is, I think for you, got to be really fun to just like have access to everything, right? And be able to see kind of what works and what doesn't. I know personally that's something that I've always been attracted to, and probably part of the reason that Tribe is so focused on the analytics work. Is that kind of what attracted you to that space in the first place, or what was it that made you want to kind of dive in?
Well, as I said, I landed my first job at the intersection of using statistics to measure advertising. And from there, I basically did analytics across a whole host of clients on the vendor side. So worked at AC Nielsen and Information Resources. And those two companies collect data from grocery drug and mass merchandiser stores. So at the disposal, you have all the consumer sell-through information. And so then what we would do is then complement that and measure advertising, GRPs, and pricing, and you name it. So it was really cool to be a kid in a candy store with these companies who had all that data. So the way that I think about moving into the client side is that you want to move into the client side to be closer to where the decisions are being made. And that's really what I found the most rewarding, is that whatever data you have at a given company, and in our company, we have a lot of first party data, we have a lot of second party data, and so on. So the ability to measure all of that and then make better business decisions by working closely with brands and the brand presidents, our heads of marketing, that's what really is fun about my job today. So the transformation of working on a vendor side across clients to now going deep within a given company, especially in the beauty industry, has been really exciting. And I think the other thing I would say about the industry that you're in, I mean, prestige beauty, as you know, is a really attractive industry. It's been growing at almost 10% globally, and it has been for a few years. And many markets and many categories are growing even above that. So my unsolicited advice to any young person listening to us is you always want to start your career in an industry that's growing, because that growth drives opportunity. It's when you're working in declining industries, it really is difficult, and you're always doing non-sustainable activities like cost cutting. I know that I've been in many industries like magazine publishing that was in decline, so it's not as fun as beauty. So beauty is a really attractive and fun category.
Yeah, it's funny. I give the exact same advice to people. And the way I've always explained it is like, you can imagine, so if you're at a company that's growing, say, 50% a year, right? What happens? Well, jobs are created at roughly 50% a year, right? That's roughly how many people are going to be added to the company, right? Plus or minus. And so what that means is that, like, okay, there's a new management role that was created above you. And generally, there's a preference inside of those companies to promote from within rather than to hire outside, right? Because they know who you are, you know the business, et cetera. And so what it allows you to do as a young person is to get the opportunity for advancement in your career much more quickly than a company that's in decline, right? Where like the only way for you to go up in a company that's in decline is to actually have somebody leave, right? Or get fired or whatever. Like that's the only way for you to move up. And so it just makes it much more difficult to kind of to grow in your career. If you had to give kind of an ideal path when it comes to analytics specifically, because again, I think part of the people that are listening to this are the CMOs, et cetera, but part of them are, junior people that are looking to move up in their careers. Would you recommend they go to kind of the vendor side, like a Nielsen or somebody else that's more kind of the digitally focused analytics side of things? Or would you say go kind of brand side first?
Yeah, that's a good question. And by the way, everyone should listen to you about career advice. You definitely have a lot to say there. So from my perspective on that question, I think marketing analytics is an attractive space. It's relatively new relative to marketing, I would say. And so I would say if you're an inquisitive person, analytics is for you. I mentioned my university education, which was a nice mix of journalism and statistics. And so from journalism, what I learned is how to ask questions and how to ask the next question and how to keep asking the next question to get to the truth or to get to the why. And then from statistics, I learned skills to imply that inquisitiveness. So how do you apply models or other frames of reference within measurement to really measure everything and get to measurable business outcomes? So analytics as a practice has been around for a few decades, but I think focusing on it earlier in your career can take you further. And to your question, I would say starting on a vendor side, it doesn't have to be a Nielsen or an IRI. You could be with a digital marketing agency or someplace where you're looking to learn across categories. I think that's one of the things that was strong about my career, is that I learned a lot from just analyzing category X to category Y and applying that. The other thing I would say about analytics as an industry is that, for every 10 marketers, there's one marketing analytics person. So your opportunity to rise in an organization, in my point of view, is you're competing with a lot less people, especially if you do your job well. And I think the other piece of advice I have for analytics people and anyone in the world is to really, if you're in marketing or marketing analytics, how do you strive to deliver strong insights And what I mean by that is you really listen to a marketer's question, and then you deliver the answer to that question, and then you follow up with that business partner or that marketer to ensure that the analytics understood. That whole journey of that cycle really makes you become a trusted business partner. And I think that's what I've strived to do over my career, is how to make sure that I'm listening, answering questions, and then coming back and making sure that that people understand the analytics and what to do with them, but then to be there to make sure that the decisions are supported by the analytics and to be that trusted advisor. One of the ways I was able to do that in my career is through an industry technique called marketing mix modeling, which many people have heard of and some younger people have not. And it is leveraged by all major companies in assessing the incremental sales and contribution across the entire marketing funnel. Our company hired me to drive and build that capability, and most companies have had it. Procter & Gamble has had it for 30 years, our company for about 8 years. And we're using that, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about this today. We use marketing mix modeling to measure all of the different marketing and media elements, including earned media. And it's been our way to prove to ourselves that the earned media investments we're doing are paying off.
So talk to me kind of high level, like if you were explaining marketing mix modeling to somebody that was entirely new, like what does that process look like? Like what are you doing? What's the goals? What are the inputs? All those things.
Yeah, good question. So marketing mix modeling is essentially you're explaining some dependent variables. And that could be sales, it could be search, it could be traffic. And then what you do is you build models to take all the other, what we call independent variables, which are the explanatory variables that explain the dependent variable. So what we are doing at our company is we build models at upper funnel, which is desirability is what we call it. And we look at Google search volume. And so if a brand, let's say one of our brands is Clinique, if more people search for the brand Clinique in Google search, driven by the other marketing levers, then that's what we're explaining in the model. And if you take a model on traffic, you're trying to figure out, are people coming to your site more often because you did some marketing or media element? Models were always built on sales, which is bottom of the funnel. But for us, what was interesting is that early on, and using your data in particular, I want to say like 5-6 years ago, we were trying to figure out whether influencer marketing and influencer EMV was driving sales. And we initially couldn't detect a relationship. And what we realized is you're not always looking for a direct sales relationship. You're looking to see whether influencers and creators are driving desirability and then driving traffic and then ultimately driving sales. And by changing our approach to measure all parts of the funnel, we're actually able to show and prove that it's a strong ROI. I think the other thing that I would say is you need to use an agency. So when you asked earlier, should you work on a client side or work on a vendor side? The other idea is to go deep into these kind of models, either attribution models or marketing mix models, and learn how to bring that kind of core measurement over time, analyze it across companies, and then bring it to the client side, which is what I did later in my career. So my ability to know what those models are and then be the arbiter of the results of them with our brands and our brand marketers has been kind of the core sweet spot of how I've grown in my career.
Yeah, the concept of using Google search data to then measure like basically consumer interest, right? Is this driving consumers to want to look for us? Is like both like obvious when you say it, but like not something that people talk about, right? It's like, oh yeah, well, like that's a really clear indication of like interest for people that may buy, or it just, I don't know. I love it. And then I think on the kind of like early career thing, I can't remember who it was that I was listening to, but was basically saying like, we teach calculus in high school, but like how often do you use calculus, right? Like almost, almost
so
every
true.
role these days though, right? Like within business requires some base level understanding of statistics, analytics, how to use Excel, right? Like, and then how to present that information in a way that's compelling and makes sense and like is statistically accurate, et cetera. And like, that's not like statistics should really be like one of the core things that you're taught as a high schooler, right? And then into college as well. It just isn't.
Yeah, it isn't. And you're right about calculus. So I was one of those guys in calculus. I loved math. And at the time in university, I was focused first on journalism. So I distinctly remember being in sophomore year calculus because I love math so much. And the professor was going around the room saying the name and the degree or the major of the person. And, person X, electrical engineering, person Y, computer engineering, Doug Jensen, journalism. He's like, are you sure you're in the right place? And I was like, I don't know. I just love math. So when I told you I found the first job combining both, that was kind of cool. I would say you're right about, statistics and economics can be very daunting and intimidating to a lot of people. I have talked to a lot of marketers who many feel like it's so off-putting. And so one of the things that I try to do, I really think about this a lot, Connor. When I'm talking about a model, I don't go into the nerdy parts about how you build the model. I try to convince people that these models have been around for 30 years. They are trusted. Trust me as your business advisor that I wouldn't bring something to you that I didn't think worked.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's have a conversation about what the results show. And then obviously what are the insights to action we should do with them. So I'm trying to transform, the conversation to get more into what are we going to do about that. And, we'll talk more about this, but what we're using the models for is to go fairly granular in terms of making decisions. Should we be in Meta's Facebook, in doing paid social and doing, video versus static images? Should we be doing online video in, Roku versus YouTube? Like the placement of where you can actually put your marketing and media is incredibly interesting. And then, of course, in the earned media space, we actually look at it two different ways. We put the influencer creators on one side of the equation, and then we put, how do you harness or generate word of mouth media value through beauty editors and other people, retailer partners, celebrities, and use the models actually to tell us which of all those factors are most important.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so let's dive into some of the kind of social media influencers, creators, effects on sales, those things, because I think what's interesting for me is you started your career on the kind of Nielsen side. Imagine IRI similarly has a focus on like TV, right? Which is very much direct response. That's why you use it to measure sales, right? Because I showed an ad. Did people buy things after the ad, right? It's not really about creating community or trust or, desirability, which I love that term. So I'd love to hear about kind of one, you've had the perspective of seeing social media from the beginning to today, right? Particularly over the last 9 years at Estée Lauder. How do you guys evaluate the effect on buying, right? On the buying cycle for consumers? And how has that changed over the last, call it 9 or 10 years when it comes to social creators, influencers, the whole thing?
Yeah, there's just so much we can talk about here, Connor. I mean, the measurement we started with when we looked at the EMV, which internally we call influencer EMV to make sure that we're distinguishing it and focusing on influencers and creators. Yep. So early on in the industry, I mean, think back to 2014, 2015, and you taught us that makeup creators could show these full face looks by creators using multiple products. For smaller brands that had no other paid media support, it was very easy to see that their share growth was driven in large part by fostering the sense of community from influencers. Today, it's more evolved, and everyone knows kind of the tricks of the trade about how to work with influencers and creators. And so it's harder, in my experience, to see a direct relationship between EMV and share of market share. So that's why we use the marketing mix models that I was describing earlier, because it's able to tease apart, and not to get too nerdy or techie on what models do, but essentially what they're doing is they're, all else being equal, looking at all different marketing levers, and the models tell us what's the incremental contribution either to desirability, traffic, or sales based on each of those levers. So that's why we use the marketing mix models, because it is harder to see in the measurement. The other thing I would say that we do, we had done a lot in the past, is a lot of benchmarking just to find out where does our brand rank in Tribe, where does our brand rank in other tools similar to Tribe. And we're actually looking at that again to see how do we compete better? How do we make sure that our brands are on the forefront of this, and then partnering with them to make sure that we've got strong earned media strategies and that we're driving those strategies by looking at the benchmarking. So we kind of do all of that, and I have fun with it because I'm passionate about earned media, I'm passionate about measurement, and I'm passionate about driving the measurement to create business outcomes.
Yeah. How, in terms of other tools, so let's just assume Tribe is great, right? So, well, at least you're using it. We know that much, right? So, outside of Tribe, what are some of the other kind of systems, tools, measurement, and we'll center it around the kind of social media kind of ecosystem that you found have been really valuable to you, your teams, your brands, anything that you think is really great?
Yeah, so in earned media, we look at influencer on one side of the equation. So we look at you and some other tools around the world. And then on the other side of earned media, when I mentioned about word of mouth, we have different technologies to measure word of mouth. We call it word of mouth media value. And then I should also say that what's important to us is we have a variety of tools to do social listening. So how can you look through or examine comments and ratings and review sites, or can you look through blogs and forums and even parsing when people say good and bad things about you on social media? So I call that social listening analytics.
Yep.
And there are different technologies to do that. I mean, all of it, like the way I think about it, Connor, is I want to have on my team people who are well versed across all these analytic techniques, because the business question coming from our brands, it could be varied. It could be very specific, how do we win in earned media? Or it could be, how do we find those trends of what people are talking about? And so you need to, employ different techniques to find that. So in social listening analytics, the tools that we use there will use machine learning to parse through and understand what are the kind of conversations people are talking about. Or, I mean, even go and think about ratings and review sites. When people produce a rating on a brand.com site or on a retailer.com site, there's such richness there in the verbatims that they talk about, but to figure it out on your own just by reading the reviews will take you forever. So that's why we use machine learning and the technologies that we use. And what that does is it helps put buckets around the conversation. So if there's, let's call it a foundation conversation, there's going to be a conversation about coverage. Is it a full coverage or a medium coverage product? Or if it's in pigmentation, is the pigmentation of the color we have, is it paying off? And so understanding those conversations, that there can be discussions. We have one brand that does a lot in having scent. So is the scent payoff happening well? And are they buying the product because they find the scent attractive? So again, earned media measurement is one part, social listening analytics is another part, and then applying that through marketing mix modeling is how I think about it.
Yeah, I think the review stuff
it's a fun
is
job.
so rich in terms of the volume, and there's just so much of it too, right?
It is.
Because there's also, I mean, it's not just about your company, right? There's a lot of other companies out there. It's like, oh wow, like consumers are really attracted to this, right? Like we should pay attention here. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of trends you can find. So, in color products, you want to figure out, is there a shift in the kind of red lipstick? Is it moving in, like, what kind of finish would there be within lipstick? Within skincare has been super interesting, as you know. During the pandemic, no one wore makeup,
Yep.
and so they all wore and focused on skincare, and the skinfluencers is what we call some of those creators and dermfluencers, as you know. So we've been studying them and what they're saying and what trends they're tipping off and how consumers are responding to that. So, again, when you think about earned media, it's measurement of what people are saying about you, but again, looking into figuring out what those trends are and responding to those trends is a large part of what our company is focused on. Yeah.
Absolutely. So one of the things I always thought was interesting was kind of, forward looking versus kind of lagging indicators, right? So generally sales is kind of a lagging indicator of what's happened leading up to that point. Have you found that there are particular signals that are more forward looking versus kind of lagging in either review data, social data, anything else?
I would say when we talk about the market mix models, they do analyze the past, but they are the best way, in my opinion, to figure out where you should spend your money in the future. And what I mean by that is it's really hard to parse through a lot of the different signals that you have. So if you could figure out, and we do, that a TikTok campaign in the past seems like it's working and resonating, the marketing mix models that we use will actually tell us that. And so we've analyzed for a couple of our brands some preliminary campaigns, let's say within TikTok, that showed enormous ROI. And what is fun in talking to the brand folks is that they'll say, well, that was a campaign before we really had a good strategy against it, and now we do. So imagine how we can actually know that the future campaigns that we're doing. So my point is you need to analyze the past in order to influence the future. And again, my view is marketing mix models really do help you with that. I think the other thing that I think about is how can you use some of this influencer EMV data from you guys and put a forecast through it to figure out what are those trends. So there's a fair amount in not my group, but in other parts of my the function that I sit in, where they're spending a lot of time thinking through how can you use these inputs and put forecasting models through them to figure out the future. So it's used in multiple ways. And I think the fun part is there's no one right way to do it, and every application is different. But for me, when I think about all these different analytic tools, I hope the viewers here don't misinterpret. It's not the analytics for sake of analytics. It's really, really in service of brands and marketers making better decisions. And so the more marketing analytics person who might be listening to this thinks about it, in my opinion, the reason why I'm bringing this up is I interview a lot of people, and it seems like there's some people who are heavy duty into the measurement for the sake of measurement, and I try to teach them that it's measurement in service of an outcome, and my team knows that, and they know I'm passionate about that.
How much of it is you bringing stuff to the brands that you observe versus them coming to you with questions that they want to have answered?
It's a mix of both. I established the function that I sit in. Really, I was brought in as an analytics person to build the marketing mix capability, and then learn quickly that we needed to focus on market share reporting, which is a relatively, easy thing to do, which we're still doing today. I mean, measuring market share is incredibly important, and very proud of the work that we do there. The questions that we get, it's a mix. Sometimes our team will go through an analysis. We have been launching and studying something we call them competitive deep dives, where we will get a request from a brand, as you asked, and then go study that competitor from soup to nuts to figure out what are they doing to win, and then what are the answers, or what could we recommend that our brands do to respond. So that's an instance of a brand asking for it. Within the earned media space, a lot of it is us seeing what the patterns are, and then basically putting forward our recommendations of how earned media strategies should change based on the trends that we're seeing from your data and from competitive data. So that's the fun part, is any good analysis can be coming from anywhere. And who asked the question? Sometimes if the brand asks the question, they're going to do something with it. And sometimes if we observe something and then put that forward, it might take a couple more conversations to get that through. And one of the ways that I was asked to think about that is, Doug, how can you scale all this great learning that you do? And that's why I'm now in charge of our enterprise marketing training, so that I can build training programs to cascade those learnings across the world.
And that's the Center of Excellence component, right?
That's right. The Learning Center of Excellence that I'm in charge of. That's right.
Very cool. I want to dive into that. I want to keep going here on this one a little bit more, though. So
cool.
So let's talk about kind of other outcomes you're driving. So I think one of the things that is fascinating to me about the internet is that, it's allowed people to create community around topics that maybe they would have been really disconnected in the past, right? So whether that's like, hey, in high school, you might have been one of 3 people that wanted to be a makeup artist, but now you can find a community with 100,000 people that want to be makeup artists online and be a part of that community. And I think similarly, you have that around brands, right? Where like, hey, I am part of the Glam Glow community, right? I am attached to this brand. I'm so into it. And I think that creators, earned media, influencers are one of the primary ways that gets driven, right? Or one of the bigger drivers for it. And I think the way to kind of measure that outcome is you can say, hey, the actual community, like the number of people following me online has grown as a result of this. And I remember you bringing something to me that was pretty fascinating. And again, makes sense once you think about it, but wouldn't be obvious on the surface, which was basically you looked at and said, hey, the more influencer coverage we get, the more earned media we get, the faster our, followings grow for our brands. Is that something that you're still seeing? And have there been any other learnings like that you thought were interesting, kind of connecting the dots across the channels?
Yeah, I think in earned media, there is this knock-on effect, so that when something goes viral or people talk about it, then there's a virality, as that happens with it. And so that can actually explode the number of conversations. So I would say that the relationship earlier on in the influencer space. So when influencers talked about you, that drove conversation for brands themselves, and there was this halo effect to the brands. It's harder in the mature beauty industry now to have that happen, but that doesn't mean we don't try. I think the
Yep.
other thing that what you're bringing up is this larger ecosystem. How do you think about it? So in our case, we use the language of paid, owned, and earned, and
Mm-hmm.
we say, how do you make all of these levers work more effectively together? And some of that revolves around organization design, meaning whoever's in charge of paid may not be in charge of earned, who may not be in charge of owned. And brands need to work across those functions to make that happen. So there is a halo effect that can happen when you start to think about a campaign from the beginning. What is the objective? What's the brief? What's the consumer target? How many more consumers do I need to reach? What's the part of the funnel I want to reach? And then what are the components of paid? What are the components of owned? And what are the components of earned? And plan that all together. That's where the sweet spot happens, and that's the kind of training that we're trying to do within our organization to reinforce those principles.
Mm-hmm. In terms of, so we'll talk owned, earned, paid, whatever, all TikTok. So I'm going to talk TikTok for a second, just because I think that when I talk to marketers, like I was talking to Amy, the founder of Tower 28 yesterday. She was on a panel we did, and she's like, TikTok, TikTok, TikTok. She's like, that's all I care about anymore. She's like, honestly, I'm not as like, she's like, I'm kind of trying to dial back a little bit of my investment in Instagram, which I'm not saying that's what you should do, but that was one of the discussions we were having.
Right.
And so, what have been some of your learnings about TikTok so far, from an analytics perspective, as well as what your brands are seeing? I have to imagine that it's a hot topic within Estee Lauder as well, and an area of focus for the marketers. So talk to me about TikTok a little bit and what you're seeing.
Well, it is a hot topic at our company, and I know that Summer Tejwani, my friend from Too Faced, was on one of your podcasts, and she talked about that to the extent that it's so new, and how we've all had to learn and transform how we compete there, because 2019 no one was really talking about it, or let's say 2018 no one was talking about TikTok. So I would say at this point in its evolution, we recognize clearly the importance of TikTok and the various ways that we need to show up. And it's in a couple different ways, right? If creators discover us, or in some cases rediscover us, meaning our brands or our products, we need to react to that. And then on the other hand, we need to work to create our own campaigns. And we've had really good success with some recent campaigns. If I may kind of call out a couple of examples. So Estee Lauder, our namesake brand, launched a TikTok campaign a year ago called Night Done Right. That was the hashtag, and it drove nearly 13 billion views and led to the creation of almost 2 million videos. So its challenge used diverse creators to educate a younger audience on how important it is to take care of your skin at night. And the product there is called Advanced Night Repair for Estee Lauder. Then our Clinique brand, which is an overall skincare and makeup brand, but it has a lot of affinity in the acne space. So they created a Zit Happens campaign on TikTok, and that became a viral sensation. And there were nearly 10 billion views of that. And that created about 700,000 views on the app. And then finally, those are kind of campaigns that brands do, but a lot of virality happens to you, and it's really super exciting and interesting, right, when that happens. So Clinique has this product that was born in 1971 called Almost Lipstick. It's in the black honey color, so it's called Black Honey Almost Lipstick. As I said, it was born in 1971, but it went viral in the last year. And the number of creators who discovered it, especially diverse creators and diverse consumers, made the product go viral. And so then the question is, what do you do once that happens?
Yeah.
How do you make sure you harness that? So I'm really in awe of our brand teams who not only create these new campaigns, but react to those viral moments. And you really have to be on top of it. And everybody in the brand is studying TikTok every day. So suffice it to say, it's an incredibly valuable platform for us, but it's not the only thing that we do within the earned media space. And to your point earlier, like, we use your data to dimensionalize where is all the influencer earned media value coming from. And Instagram is still the primary platform. It's just that TikTok is emerging, and everyone knows that you need to play differently. And this is obvious, but I'll say it anyway. You cannot take a piece of content that you create in Instagram and put it onto TikTok. It won't work.
Yep.
And
Yep.
and everybody knows that, right? But then the question is, well, how do you find the right creators, and how do you make sure that those creators have the right brief so that they produce authentic content if you're working with them? It's not easy to do that. And again, I'm in awe of our brand teams who have cracked the code to make these really great campaigns.
Yeah, I wouldn't say everybody actually knows. I think the people are still doing it, right? I mean, because it costs a lot of time and money and effort to create brilliant
it's an investment,
stuff, right? But
it's definitely an investment, yes.
But I think that the devil is in the kind of nuance, right? Where there are specific inside jokes. There's a specific understanding to the way that you choose music. There's a specific understanding to the community that's there and what they think is interesting that has a big effect on, a piece of content success. And so, it's a real investment to be able to do great content across all these different platforms. But I think if you can get it right, obviously the payoff's there, right? The TikTok made me buy it trend it tends to occur.
Yeah, and then the problem you'll have is TikTok make me buy it, and then we go out of stock, and then how do you react?
I've always thought about the supply chain in the era of social media and virality. It just sounds like a mess, because it's like something hits hot and you're like, well, how am I supposed to predict that, right? Like, it's so hard to know that's coming.
Yeah, we do have conversations within our supply chain teams, like, how do you react to that? And I don't think anyone's really cracked the code on it. It's really more, again, about reacting to the virality when it happens to you. How do you work with a creator to make sure it's okay if you want to repost their content? And oftentimes then, if the product goes out of stock, then you can come back when it comes back in stock and have another campaign related to that. Hey, you love this product. Sorry, it was out of stock, and now we have it in stock again. So some of our brands have done that.
Yeah, I talked to the ColourPop team about that a little bit. And I think because they've got a vertically integrated model and they've got their manufacturing basically in the same house as their marketing down in Southern California, they can react a little bit more quickly, which I think is nice in those circumstances.
Sure.
So let's talk a little bit about kind of, you, right? So you, the industry, and then we'll do one kind of fun end of show question. So I think for you, obviously, you've achieved a lot of success, regardless of whether it's analytics or not analytics. As represented by a very large leadership role at a large public company. So what would you say, to the younger people that also want to get into kind of more senior leadership roles over time? What would you say are some of the things that you've learned about leadership, as well as just about, just what do you think are some of the philosophies that led you to where you are today? In terms of how you operate within a business?
Well, I would say I never feel like I'm a good leader. I always feel like I'm always learning and growing. But I think one thing about being a good leader is that you always have to pay attention to what's important to grow your team. Good leaders are in service to their team. Mm-hmm. And that means, whatever you can do to make something easier to get done, or to build a relationship with someone so that you can have your team be successful. And how do you have moments where you give your team opportunities to shine in front of senior leaders? So I think about that a lot. I think the other thing about your leadership team is to pick the right leaders, give them the strategic vision and the roadmap, and then get out of their way to execute. But then be there to answer questions and steer them in areas of uncertainty. And of course, during the pandemic, and even coming out of the pandemic, there's been a lot of uncertainty. How do we go back to the office? What does that look like? How do people respond to that? And how do I support my leaders when they make those decisions? So I don't know if I'm a good leader. I try really hard. I think about it every day. Like, what can I do better today? And, there's no one right way to do that, but I think about it every day. And I think that, what can I do to get person X to where they want to go in the career? And one of the things I started to do was to spend time with the younger team members, the junior ones, the ones we just hired in the company, and spend time with them so that I could get smarter about getting them to where they want to go faster. Because I think the worst thing could be that you had someone leave your group or the company and they wanted to go somewhere and you didn't know that. And so that has happened to me in the last couple of years. So I strive to be better, to find out, well, what is it that you want to do, and how can I get you where you want to go? it's not always going to work, but as long as you try, that's the idea. I'm also really a big fan of having different leaders talk about talent. So, how can I get person X to a different place, to a brand or to a different function? And I spend a lot of time thinking through that. And then in general, I try to be a mentor. When I was growing up, I never really had a mentor. So now I'm in a couple different programs internally, and then I'm a mentor for Adweek, and that means getting a mentee outside of my company. I'm a mentor for our LGBT group. I try to pay it forward a little bit to spend time with younger people to make sure that if I have wisdom, I can impart that, or I can at least talk to them about where they want to go and how I can help with that.
Well, and honestly, I think that is what kind of makes a good leader, right? Is you're trying to think about how you help these people get to where they want to go, right? I know I was talking with Scott Friedman, who's the CEO of Rare Beauty and was the CEO of NYX before that, and just is very well regarded by the people that he's worked with as a leader. And I was talking to him about it. He's like, yeah, he's like, my job, he's like, what I view my job as CEO is to get the best possible people, right? So you get the best people in the right positions, and then really try to remove as many barriers as I can, right? Just how can I help them succeed and let them go, right? And then again, if it's not working or it's not the right fit, then you make a decision, but really getting the right people into the right places and then letting them thrive is, I think, the way to win in the long run, for sure.
Exactly. It sounds like you have that conversation with everybody you have on this podcast, which is good to hear. I mean, I think everyone should be thinking about ways to drive leadership, and that younger people, again, listening to this, there's no soon enough time to talk about what it means to be a good leader, because the sooner you can think about that in your own career, if you're very young, the more you're going to get to where you need to go.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, part of the reason I asked that question is I try to think about it myself, right? Similar kind of growth mindset. Like, okay, like I don't think I was particularly good at the beginning. I'm not great now, but I'm okay. And yeah, and I think you find, like, one of the things that I've enjoyed most, or I've observed that I think is interesting, is like, when we first started the company, I read an obscene amount of business literature, and you'd like find these patterns. It'd be like three different people describing the same thing in three different ways, right? All getting to some kind of core truth. And so I think when you hear different perspectives on one thing, okay, like you can start to get to your own version of that is a combination of other people's perspectives. Okay, so last question. Obviously your last kind of 9 years or so has been in the beauty industry, but before that, you touched a variety of different industries on the consumer goods side. What have you noticed that is different about beauty versus other industries? And maybe what are some of the, talk to me a little bit about that. Like, how do these different industries kind of operate from your perspective? The ones you've touched, at least.
Yeah, so I've been in beauty 9 years at Estée Lauder and 7 years at Avon, so 16 years total. And the whole social media movement and earned media movement that we've been living through, let's say it's relatively recent. Mm-hmm. So I've always wondered, what would it be like to work at a traditional CPG company trying to make your way through how to harness and leverage social media? So I guess what I would say is, for those people watching this who are not in the beauty industry, how could you get into the beauty industry? Because it's growing, as I mentioned earlier. It's growing roughly 10% globally every year. And then secondly, because earned media and social media moves so quickly, I would say just being in one industry and going deep on that, and then understanding how those trends are evolving, has been super interesting. Mm-hmm. So we talked about this earlier, but for example, makeup led the way 5, 6, 7 years ago with creators teaching consumers how to be creative. And then, as we all know, during the pandemic, no one was wearing makeup. Everyone then said they're going to take care of their skin and their hair, actually. And, fragrance, as another category, had a different distinct opportunity for growth. A lot of people were gifting fragrance, and a lot of people were buying fragrance for themselves, especially in the luxury fragrance part. So how do you basically check those trends and really tap into them in the beauty industry is what I find incredibly interesting. And then I think only in beauty does a consumer see such power in their voice about how a creator or a consumer, someone with very little following, as we said, in TikTok can go viral. So, I don't know if we talked about this, but 10 years ago, it was the beauty brand as the authority, working with the beauty editor at a publication, and the consumer consumed that content. And that's all been flipped on its head, as we all know. And that's exciting because now the consumer is in control, and the consumer, and I think for the brand, the exciting thing is to just pay that much more attention to what the consumer is saying. What do they like? What are they looking for? And as we said, ratings and review sites, you find out how people like or don't like your products. And that's just such a rich place to understand that. But more importantly, in the trends, you have the opportunity to listen to that creator, listen to that consumer. And if you listen closely, you will learn a lot. And I think all of us recognize that. It's just, how do you focus on that? And so what my job is largely at my company is to bring those insights to the brands so that they can action on them, and bring those insights for wherever they come from. And for me, it's been really fun to work in the beauty industry. It's been fun to see the growth. I work for incredibly well-respected and well-run company, and I couldn't be more proud of that. So it's been a good run. I'm not done, but I don't see myself going anywhere else because of the richness of this industry.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the depth of knowledge you have about an industry, compounds over time, right? And becomes increasingly valuable.
It absolutely does.
I think that
It absolutely
I've seen
does.
that with, because I observe a lot of entrepreneurs as well. And it depends on what you're going for, right? What your goals are. But you'll see people, it's like, I can't remember who it was like, there's a guy who co-founded a company. It was called like PeopleSoft. Then he sold that. Then he started another one that was in like the HR, software space. And then the third one was Workday, right? And Workday has obviously done very, very well, tens of billions of dollars. And it's like, if you're going for economic outcomes, like depth of expertise is really valuable from a career perspective. Now, if you're going for a variety of experiences, right, then that's a different goal. And won't, I think, necessarily have the same expected economic outcomes. But anyways, okay, enough with work stuff.
I think that's true.
So we're gonna do one fun end of show question, and I'm actually gonna let you pick from two. So you get to choose which question you want to answer, or you can answer both. So
Okay.
The first one is, you love to travel, right? So you gave us a bunch of recommendations on our safari trip down. And I really appreciated that. So one option is, where's your next big trip? Like, what's the next bucket list place you guys want to go to? And then the second one is, you're a notoriously good chef. And so I want to know, I'm no, but you're.
Oh, I'm going to answer both because they're both.
No, but you're getting into your journey of cooking. And what's your latest dish that you've made that you're excited about, or maybe you're not cooking anymore? I don't know.
I'm going to do the cooking one first. So I am notoriously a horrible chef. I'm horrible in the kitchen. But here's what happened during the pandemic when I couldn't go to the grocery store. I signed up for HelloFresh, which is one of those meal delivery services. And every week you get 3 meals, let's say, and then everything comes prepared perfectly. And Connor, I am becoming this little mini gourmet chef. I'm like little Doug Jensen, who couldn't cook, who couldn't boil water, who couldn't cook pasta, is making these incredible. So people who know me well, they laugh at me because I've been posting Instagram stories of all my meals, and they're like, "Yeah, enough of the meals. You've done that." Let me go back to the safari question. So I'm super interested in Africa and safaris. I've been on 2. I've been to near Kruger National Park in South Africa, and then I've been in the Serengeti in Tanzania. And I am dying to go. My next big trip, Connor, is going to be in Botswana. The safari there is in the river delta. And then next door is Namibia, where it's like a desert. So the combination of desert and delta. And if anyone wants any advice about safaris, I would love to give advice. This is fun. So my South Africa safari, we went to a camp and I was introduced to what we call our ranger, and our ranger is the guy who takes you on the safari. He then left that camp, started his own business, and he's who personally took me to Serengeti in
Wow.
Tanzania. So now and he's emailing me every week, like, when are we going? When are we going? When are we going to Botswana? And I'm like, yeah, exactly. Let's get the world under a little bit of control. That's just probably a stupid thing to think, but yeah, that's my next big trip. It's a safari.
Oh, that's awesome. And I love the Hello Fresh. That's funny. It's cool. I mean,
I know,
it's
right?
awesome that it unlocked that for you, right? That they were able to create that experience.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. HelloFresh, if you're listening, I am a micro.
Well, now a little bit bigger, right? So, well, Doug, I really appreciate you taking out the time. I'm so glad we were able to make this happen after so many years of working together. And
I love this, Connor. Thank you so much for thinking of me.
Yeah,
It's been a pleasure.
and glad you're continuing to do the mentorship stuff. I think it's gonna be really valuable to people. Awesome. All right, bye, Doug.
Be a friend, tell a friend, and subscribe. Earned by Creator IQ. Creator IQ is your all-in-one solution to grow, manage, scale, and measure your influencer marketing program. Ready to unlock the power of the creator economy? Get started with a demo today at creatoriq.com.